I baptized my crazy aunt as a bride of Satan. My aunts always pressured me to get baptized, even though it goes against my beliefs. When she got it into her head that I was a witch, it sent her over the edge. She forced my younger brother to get baptized in my place, so I got revenge by baptizing her as a bride of Satan. Things got even crazier from there when we learned that the priest she used wasn't even the real deal. My parents believe in the freedom of choosing one's own religion. My mother was raised Catholic, while my father believes in a God without participating in any church. At 14, I honestly do not care too much about the topic, to the dismay of my aunt. During my childhood, she constantly tried to pressure my mother into getting me baptized. Whenever I visited them, she would try to push Christianity on me. She would read the Bible to me and take me to her church, among other things. This made me very uncomfortable, to the point where I did not want to visit anymore. I recently developed an interest in herbs and plants. This somehow convinced her that I practice witchery. Now she constantly switches between trying to save me and making a point of avoiding me. Most of the family thinks her silly, but like always, when she's acting crazy, everyone just accepts it. Since I did not budge, she focused on my 5-year-old brother. He's friends with my 6-year-old cousin, and therefore spends a lot of time at their house. On his latest visit, my aunt decided to make an appointment with a priest, forge my mother's signature, and get my brother baptized. After my brother told my mother about the incident, which my aunt told him not to do, my mother confronted my aunt on her next visit. My aunt proudly confessed to having saved my brother, and a screaming match ensued. As I already mentioned, my parents strongly believe that everyone should be able to choose their own beliefs and not join a church until one is old enough to make an informed decision. To summarize my aunt's words, she could not believe that our mother was willfully condemning us to heck, and that it was no wonder I had become a satanic witch. She had to act, because my mother obviously couldn't be brought to her senses, and someone had to save the boy. In a moment of anger, I went to my room to get one of my pots. I have one pot in the shape of a skull, and I filled it with water. While they were still screaming at each other, I poured the water over her, then I declared her to be baptized a witch and the lawful wife of Satan. I'll be honest, I enjoyed the expressions of shock and then panic on her face. She told me to undo what I did. I refused. Once she realized she could not convince me, she stormed out of the house. Then she told the whole family about it, and my grandparents and other relatives have been bombarding my mother with hateful messages. My mother says she understands why I did what I did, but that I need to undo it to keep the peace. I'm supposed to make a show of de-baptizing her and declaring her Christian again. I'm just tired of everybody constantly talking about religions, and fed up with my aunt and everybody's endurance of her. If she can just go around and baptize my brother, why can't I do the same to her? Am I the jerk if I do not comply with my parents' wishes? Edit. Apparently, neither the baptism of my brother nor the priest itself were legitimate. The dude is not even registered as a priest, and is just someone she found online. He, with my aunt and grandmother, held a small, unofficial ceremony. My grandmother confessed this to my grandfather once the drama started, and he now told my mother. The whole thing is rather weird, and my grandfather told my mother to report the priest, but my mother just wants to leave the whole story behind us. Since his baptism doesn't have any real effect on my brother, she sees this as an easy solution to get her sister off her back. We're just happy my brother is not actually baptized. Also, good news is my mother no longer wants me to de-baptize my aunt, and finally accepted that she's simply crazy. She'll try to talk with my grandmother tomorrow, since she's not as crazy as my aunt, and can hopefully convince her to leave me alone. According to my grandfather, my aunt told the story of me baptizing her very differently, which is why my relatives were on her side. Despite all the hilarious suggestions on how I could continue to scare my aunt, I'll not do anything like that. I'll just wait and see how things go from here. I'm curious where online this original poster's aunt found a man who admits to not being ordained as a priest, yet still offers to do baptisms. Either way, it seems weird that everyone's so relieved. Whether the baptism was real or not has no effect on his ability to choose. Being dunked in some water does not force you to follow a single belief for the rest of your life. Which means OP definitely isn't the jerk, because her witchy baptism never needed undoing in the first place. Sure, you're always a little bit of a jerk when you pour water on an unsuspecting person, But I'm about 86% positive OP was never ordained at the Satanic Church of Bartolo Longo, so it's insane that the entire family took it so seriously. Assuming this isn't your first time online, it won't surprise you that some commenters hated the aunt the moment they learned she was Christian. That's a bit much. But I will say that I've read their book, and I can't remember the story where Jesus won people over by forcing them underwater against their will. This isn't the Iron Islands, and Jesus isn't the drowned God. He was a man who led by an example of love and tolerance. Maybe this aunt should start practicing her own beliefs before criticizing the beliefs of others. My ex got a girl pregnant while cheating and wants me to help raise their kids. I was with Liam for over a decade and had 2 children with him. We broke up when I learned he was cheating on me with Ella. She was pregnant when I learned about their tryst, and the 2 of them were very smug about the fact they were going to start a family with my kids, who were young enough at the time to potentially see Ella as a second mom in their lives. Ella was downright nasty, saying she could provide for them so much better because her parents were wealthy, and that she'd be #1 mom in no time. We ended up getting shared custody of our children, and the schedule was 1 week on, 1 week off. My ex and I had to meet at a neutral location, per our custody order, to reduce conflict and any problems with the exchange of our children. The judge also ruled that Ella could not be present for exchanges, given her alienating language toward me that was not totally hidden from mine and Liam's children. My ex and Ella got a big shock when her family did not support them, following the realization that she helped him cheat and had gotten pregnant with someone who had a family. So they ended up struggling, while I was doing better than ever after making a career shift I had wanted for a bit before that. They of course realized this over time. This was, I think, just after they had their daughter and around the time they got married. Then the name I had heard they'd chosen for their daughter was suddenly changed to my name. They started being super kiss-up with me and saying how my kids deserved one family unit. They argued their daughter was named after me, was my kid's little sister, and she needed someone to help support her and give her the life her siblings have. I told them they were bat guano crazy, and I was not their daughter's anything. They had 2 more girls since then, and apparently they're telling those girls that I'm their aunt or their other mom, hence the older of the 3 being named after me. The oldest is always trying to seek me out. My ex brings her during exchanges of our kids, and she rushes out of the car with my kids. They've told me how uncomfortable it makes them because they aren't allowed to correct her. I told my ex he needs to say something. I said the same thing to Ella, but they did nothing. A few days ago, their oldest sought me out again and asked if she could stay over when my kids stay with me, saying she's so glad I'm her aunt and her other mom. I told her I wasn't. I said so kindly, but I was also firm that I was not her aunt or her mom in any way. She got upset and ran back to her parents, and then I got dumped on by Ella for breaking their daughter's heart. She said they had only tried to be nice and make the best of the family situation for the kids, and I was a jerk. I feel kind of bad because the little girl was devastated. At the same time, I don't have any interest in being part of those 3 girls' lives in any kind of way, except for when I see them for my kids. Am I the jerk for telling my ex's daughter that I'm not her aunt or her other mom? No, the jerks here are Liam and Ella. They saw that OP was making more money and tried to take advantage of it. The worst part is that they used their own child's emotions as leverage. Sure, it would be nice if these half-siblings could have a healthier relationship than their parents do. They are all affected by the same awful situation, so they at least have that in common. But it should be up to them whether they want to bond over that. Their own parents shouldn't be manipulating them, especially when it seems like they're mostly doing it because of money. All OP did was tell this girl the truth, something her parents were not willing to do. Depending on her age, it might be harsh to drop that on her. Commenters have asked about the child's age, but that seems to be the one question OP doesn't want to answer. Either way, she was going to learn the truth at some point no matter what. If OP really wanted to be the jerk, she could probably use Liam's lies against him to alter their custody agreement. She isn't doing that. She's simply choosing not to bond with someone who reminds her of her ex's betrayal. And it doesn't sound like she's trying to keep the kids from getting to know each other, so I can't really think of anything she did wrong here. What do you think? Could OP have handled this differently? Or do you agree with most people that all the fault here lands on the ex? Comment below with your thoughts on whether OP is the jerk and why or why not. If you made it this far in the video, consider liking and subscribing for more videos coming. Karen leaves her baby in a hot car and refuses to let people help. Back in the 1980s, my dad was the manager of a Kmart. There was a lady who accidentally locked her baby in the back of the car and her keys inside with it. She had come into the store because there were no cell phones back then, and she wanted them to call a locksmith. This was Texas in July or August, so it got really hot really fast. The locksmith and police were called. The baby was crying and in distress while they waited on a locksmith or the police, and everyone was getting really nervous. But the mom wouldn't allow them to damage the car, even to save her baby's life. People were saying her kid might not survive, and she said they'd be fine and to just wait. She said she would sue anyone who damaged her car and that it was brand new. That's when this large Texan, way over 6 feet, walks up to the lady and says, "Do you know who I am?" The lady gets incredulous and says of course she doesn't. He then says, "Good." And with his cowboy boots, he kicked in the front window of the car and walked away while she shrieked. Meanwhile, all the people who'd gathered around tried to help the baby. The cops and ambulance showed up later, and she wanted the guy arrested. But no one knew who he was, and he had vanished at that point. My dad was pretty sure he was friends with at least a few of the workers, but on that day, no one knew who he was. The best part of this story is just the number of commenters assuming the man in question was Chuck Norris. I hate to be that guy, but he's from Oklahoma and only 5'10". But whoever this mysterious stranger was, he's just as legendary. When he asked the lady if she knew who he was, I actually was expecting him to be a Texas Ranger or something along those lines. But this is the first time I've seen anyone ask that question where they were hoping the answer would be no. Sadly, it doesn't sound like there were any consequences for this woman. I don't know if there legally can be. By calling the cops, she might have done the bare minimum of what she was required to do. Because if there's anything the world needs, it's another parent who does the bare minimum. Entitled Karen won't stop asking personal questions about my body. For the last few years, I've been developing vitiligo all over my body. It's become very noticeable on my hands. For those that do not know, vitiligo is a skin condition in which the white blood cells attack the melanin, or pigment, in your skin. This causes loss of skin color. I have naturally tan skin, so this has resulted in very noticeable white patches forming all over my hands. My family, mostly my brother and dad, have mocked me for this skin condition on multiple occasions. As a result, I've become self-conscious about my white spots and have started to wear tattoo concealer to cover it up. The other day I was heading out to work and forgot to put on the concealer. One of the places that I go before heading into work is my local coffee shop. As I was in line, a kid that was probably about 9 or 10 came up to me and proceeded to say, "Ew, what's wrong with your hands?" I ignored them at first because I found it rude. While they were a child, I was always raised by my mom from a young age to never stare, point, or criticize people's conditions, especially since we never know how they may have gotten them. After ignoring the kid, they then asked me again what is wrong with my hands. I relented and told them that I was uncomfortable talking about it and to please not ask me again. I then proceeded to turn my back around. I know that I could have used this as an educational moment, but I do not feel that it's my responsibility to educate others on how to be decent human beings, or about my skin condition. The kid did not like my response, and it was at this point that the child's mother got involved. Let me tell you what, I've always thought these stories of entitled parents and rude people were exaggerated, and that no one could be this oblivious. But after this interaction, my opinion of these stories has changed. She got my attention with the dreaded "excuse me" phrase, and I knew I was in for a ride. The interaction went as follows. She said, "My child asked you what was wrong with your hands. The least you could do is tell them what happened." "Ma'am," I said, "I'm not comfortable talking about it. I do not need to tell your child anything." "Well, why not?" she asked. "If you did not want people to ask about your deformity, then you should wear a glove. Now I'll ask again. What is wrong with your hand?" It was at this point that I saw red. However, keeping my emotions in check, I calmly said, "I was in a terrible accident in which my hand was mangled. It was mangled so badly that I almost lost my hand altogether. Each white spot that you see is a scar from where bone, blood, muscle, and tendons were on the outside of my hand. I lost lots of blood and almost perished from it. I was lucky enough that my hand was saved, but it left me with scars." While this was all fabricated on the spot, I felt that being as graphic as I could would maybe teach her and her spawn a lesson in leaving people alone, especially after they already told you that they did not feel comfortable talking about it in the first place. She honestly clutched her imaginary pearls as I was recounting the story, and by the time I was done, she was white in the face. She then grabbed her child and left the line quickly. It's sad that this OP's mother raised him not to point and laugh, yet somehow his own brother didn't get the message. If not for having such a mean family, OP might have been comfortable answering the kid's questions. Either way, OP is wrong when he says he didn't want to use the moment to teach anything. He was trying to teach that kid about manners when he said directly that he didn't like talking about his hands. If Karen had backed him up, that might have been the end of it. Instead, this crazy lady actually blamed her child's lack of behavioral education on the fact that OP wasn't wearing gloves. There are people whose vitiligo is most prominent on their face. What would Karen have had OP do in that case? Walk around in a Phantom of the Opera mask? Because I don't feel like that would keep people from asking questions. Neither would wearing gloves during an extremely hot summer. The biggest thing up for debate here is whether telling a graphic story to a child is really the best way to punish the parent. I could see that being argued both ways, but I'm more interested in your opinion. How would you handle OP's situation? Leave a comment and let us know. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.